Welcome to our forum on the Park Hill Golf Course. This will be an educational and very informative event for you this afternoon. How many of you stayed for the first event with the Olympics? Very good. Thanks for staying back. So my name is Lamone Noles. I'm president of City Park Friends and Neighbors. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you. And the purpose of today's forum is to broaden the outreach to the community about the potential outcome for the Park Hill Golf Course, to address another scenario where Park Hill Golf Course could be 100% open space instead of commercial development and limited open space, to address your questions and concerns about the information presented to you today, and to keep you informed about future updates regarding the Park Hill Golf Course. We have attempted to bring a panel to you with varying perspectives. An extremely important viewpoint is from the city of Denver. Unfortunately, there were no officials on the panel. Starting over a month ago, the forum organizers began reaching out to Councilman Brooks and Herndon and the mayor and his senior staff to participate as panelists. Disappointingly, all of them said that they were unable to participate. Yesterday, Evan Dreyer, one of the mayor's deputy chiefs of staff and one of the invited officials, advised that the following city employees would be attending the forum today. Steve Nally from the Department of Community Planning and Development, John McGrath from the City Attorney's Office, Happy Haynes, Executive Director, Denver Parks and Rec, Nancy Kuhn from the Department of Public Works, Michael Sapp from the North Denver Cornerstone Collaborative, and Grace Ramirez from the Office of Community Affairs. We want to thank Charlotte Brantley, CEO and President of the Clayton Early Learning Center, for serving on our panel. And we also want to thank our volunteers sponsoring R&Os. The Greater Park Hill Community, Inc., the Overlook at Park Hill Village Single Family Homes Association, Park Hill Village Condominium Association, Park Hill Village Townhome Association, Elyria and Swansea Neighborhood Association, City Park Friends and Neighbors, and the Denver INC Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation. I would also like to introduce our panelists and our forum moderator. Brad Cameron. Brad is a retired attorney who worked for 25 years in the Natural Resources section of the Colorado Attorney General's office, in the last 10 years which was spent representing the Colorado Department of Parks and Wildlife. Since retirement, Brad has been a member of the INC Park and Recreation Committee since early 2017. He has been the INC representative on the Clayton's Park Hill Golf Course Citizens Advisory Committee. Kevin Doyle. Since 2002, Kevin has lived with his family in the Overlook at Park Hill community immediately east of the Park Hill Golf Course, and he has served on the board of directors of the Overlook at Park Hill HOA and R&O since 2005. A former wildland and structural firefighter, Kevin is now the co-owner of a family mortgage business. Since early 2017, he has been the Overlook at Park Hill representative on the Clayton's Park Hill Golf Course Citizens Advisory Committee. Jeff Romeo. Jeff lives with his wife in the Overlook at Park Hill community directly behind the Park Hill Golf Course. He is a board member of the Overlook at Park Hill HOA and R&O, and a wellness practitioner by trade as the owner of a luxury travel agency that coordinates trips with a focus on health and wellness. Charlotte Brantley. Charlotte Brantley joined the Clayton Early Learning as the president and CEO in 2006 after holding a variety of early childhood leadership appointments at local, state, and national levels. Previously, she taught preschoolers in model early learning education programs, early childhood education programs. She has been honored with many different awards in recognition for her work in early childhood education in Denver and also nationally. Kathleen Wells is an emerita professor at Case Western Reserve University. A social psychologist by training, she spent 30 years teaching and researching issues in child welfare. After retiring, she expanded her focus to include children's needs for parks, open space, and a livable climate. In Denver, she has served on various neighborhood park boards, and including the Cheeseman Park Advisory Group. She is presently on the steering committee of the Denver chapter of the Citizens Climate Lobby. In that capacity, she lobbies U.S. senators and representatives, writes papers, and gives public presentations on climate issues. And our moderator, Ms. Tracey MacDermott. Tracey MacDermott is the board chair of the Greater Park Hill Community, Inc. She is employed as a clinical trials manager at the University of Colorado Medical School Department of Surgery, and she is also a climate leader with the Climate Reality Project. Introducing Tracey. Thank you.
So thank you everyone for coming, and this is a really nice turnout, which means you're involved with your community, and we can't ask for anything more than that. No matter how you feel about what's going on with the Park Hill Golf Course, thank you for coming. So the format of today, Brad Cameron will open. He'll have 10 minutes to speak, followed by Kevin Doyle, who'll have 7 minutes, followed by Jeff Romeo, who will have 7 minutes. Charlotte Brantley will have 10, and Kathleen Wells will have 10, and then we will open it up to questions. You can either, there will be a microphone set up, or there will be people going around the room to collect cards that can be passed up to ask the panel. And so with that, we're going to get started.
Okay, again, my name's Brad Cameron. I'm with the Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation Park and Rec Committee. If I'm not speaking loud enough, please wave and back. 10 minutes is really fast to give much of a background, but there are 3 things that I really want to emphasize and I hope you come away with. First of all, at this point in time, the City of Denver holds a conservation easement over Park Hill Golf Course that limits the use of the golf course to either that as a golf course or as open space. Second of all, at this point in time, the operator of the golf course, Arcus, has until July 1st of this year to decide whether it wants to exercise a 5-year renewal of the lease. And that is something that could really change the whole discussion that's been going on over the past year. And then third, and perhaps most important, at this point in time, there's no question, Denver is going to be constructing a stormwater detention facility on the northeast corner of the golf course. That is a given, and it is something that many of us believe is necessary to provide stormwater detection for the I-70 project. Now, I want to, before we go off the slide here, I just want to point out, this is the area in the northeast corner that's contemplated for the stormwater detention facility. I also want to point out that what you see there, the green, is 155 acres, but going back to the early 1980s, it did look very different. The portion in the very northwest corner there, which if you can see my red pointer, that was carved out in the early 1980s. At one point it was contemplated to be the home of the Denver Mint, but it didn't happen. It's now been developed. And then about 20 years ago, 1997, the portion there in the southeast corner was carved out. So it's important to recognize that there's already been a considerable amount of development that has happened on Park Hill Golf Course. And by the way, Cindy is doing the slides, so when I talk about Cindy, let's go forward to the next one. I did want to just give a brief information about, if we're going forward, Cindy. The next one you'll see is about a little bit of information about INC, but we don't have much time for that. A few quick facts. As is clear, Park Hill Golf Course is at this point in time ostensibly owned by Clayton Early Learning, and it is leased to a private golf course operator. And the size of Park Hill Golf Course is 155 acres. It sounds pretty big, but I want to give some comparison. Washington Park is 158 acres. So it gives you an idea of sort of what park sizes we have. And City Park is 315 acres. So it gives you a little bit of idea of what we're dealing with. Now, starting back in March of 2017, Clayton really for the first time publicly came forward and announced that there was a lot of consideration of what was going to happen with the golf course. And at that point in time, myself and some other folks from INC went to the meeting, and we came out of that and we really felt that this was a golden opportunity for the city of Denver to establish another large regional park. As everybody knows, Denver's population has just been exploding. We're on track to gain 100,000 people this decade. And as some, I think some others will talk about, there really is a need for additional parkland. Indeed, the city and county of Denver has talked about that in its game plan for parks. So we really saw that as an opportunity at INC. And so back in April, keep going, Cindy, you'll catch up with me. Keep going. One more, there we go. So back in April, we at INC adopt a resolution. You can see it up there on the screen, but essentially it called for the city to commit to trying to preserve, oh, we went back to the wrong one, to try to preserve Park Hill Golf Course as open space. And I want to call your attention to the underlined portion. The resolution from April last year, we thought that there was no mechanism in place that was currently protecting Park Hill Golf Course. And it wasn't too long afterwards that we realized that that whereas clause was wrong. Thanks to a lot of work by some folks in INC, and particularly want to thank Maggie Price, who's got fantastic internet research skills, we pretty much had to uncover for ourselves the conservation easement that was put in place. Thanks to Mayor Wellington Webb back in 1997 and members of City Council, Denver purchased 20-some years ago a conservation easement that limits what can be done on the 155 acres of Park Hill Golf Course. Now, I want to mention there are two fact sheets that are out there. There's a history of the Park Hill Golf Course and also a future of the Park Hill Golf Course. You know, those have a lot of facts, which I just don't have time to go into. Go on to the next screen, though. But I did briefly want to answer the question, you know, so what is a conservation easement? You know, we're familiar with what's called an affirmative easement. That's where, like, a power company can go on somebody's land to build a power line and do all that. Affirmative one gives you the right to go on somebody's land and do something. But a conservation easement is different. It's called a negative easement because it limits what the landowner can do. And that's exactly what the city's rights at this point in time over Park Hill Golf Course are. The city has the right to say no, it can only be used for open space and a golf course. Why don't we go ahead? Now, the next couple ones I'm going to jump through because we just don't have time, but these are some things that are on the fact sheet about the history of the conservation easement. But the most important thing probably is to realize there was an interim agreement that came into place called an agency agreement. Keep going to the next one, Cindy. And the interesting thing, and very clear in that, paragraph 24, is the agency agreement and the conservation agreement can be removed by act of city council. So that brings us to the last year and sort of the politics that are going on with the situation. First of all, you know, INC had called for, back in April of last year, for consideration in the general obligation bond election that we held last year, for the city to think about having the funds necessary to purchase the remaining portion of Park Hill Golf Course, because nobody expects Clayton to just sort of give away this asset for free. Obviously, if you paid attention to the bond election, Park Hill Golf Course was not included in that. And then in September of last year, the city and Clayton unveiled a proposed contract for the purchase and sale of the golf course to the city. A very complicated contract, and again, don't have time to go into it, and it's somewhat moot at this point in time. But it certainly could come back in some form depending what happens with the golf course operator. Point number 4 there, I just have to point out, again, thanks to Maggie Price, in October, she found online an appraisal that Clayton had done of Park Hill Golf Course. Clearly stated that with the conservation easement in place, it was worth about $3.1 million, but without the conservation easement in place, it was worth about $24.4 million. So it gives you sort of the idea of the different values. But then moving forward, next screen, Cindy, the real bombshell came in November of last year. Prior to that point in time, Clayton had been advising everyone that the golf course operator was losing money, had no interest in really continuing with golf course operations after this year, 2018. And lo and behold, the city and Clayton came forward in November of last year and said, well, that assumption was wrong. The golf course operator had refused to release its right to renew the golf course lease for at least 5 years. And that really threw the proposed contract between Clayton and put it in limbo. So, because the city really needs to construct, at least in its mind, the stormwater detention facility, in January of this year, City Council authorized the city to use, if it must, condemnation authority to acquire the necessary construction and permanent easements for the stormwater detention facility, estimated to be about probably 35 acres of the golf course. So that is a given. There probably at this point in time is little doubt that the city is going to be moving forward to do that, and to a certain extent we are waiting to see what the golf course operator wants to do and let us know whether they'll renew. But I think the sense was that this is an opportunity to continue the discussion of what the future of the golf course may be. If the golf course operator doesn't renew, then clearly the question, the future of the golf course is going to be on the table, and that's why we're here today. So hopefully I got close to 10 minutes. All right. Oh, okay. Pay attention here. You might be towed. If you have a black Jeep, license plate 715, is it NAZ? You might get towed outside, so pay attention. And another one is a silver station wagon, license plate 565 WLD. If those are your vehicles, you might want to move them. They might get towed. And that doesn't, they're in driveways, so that doesn't count against my time. So.
Thanks, Tracey. 16 years ago, in March of 2002, my wife and I were driving around looking for a place to start a family. And we had looked up north and down south, and we looked at Stapleton that was just getting going, and there was excitement in the air. We were newly engaged, and there was new projects popping up all over Denver, so we were excited. And after looking, we came across the Overlook at Park Hill and just fell in love. We walked into that sales office and we were instantly sold on the golf course community and the conservation easement that protected the open space. So we put earnest money down and we got into contract. And as we started to sign the purchase agreement, we learned a couple things that were interesting, makes our community a bit unique. It's an owner-occupied community, and we had to sign an affidavit that said we will remain owner-occupied. We also had to acknowledge the golf course covenants and documents and easement documents. There was a barrier net easement. And we had to sign a waiver that said if there's errant golf balls hitting to your house, they're not responsible. So yeah, we were a bit shocked by that, and then the real gut punch came when we found out we had to pay $10,000 lot premium to help afford the barrier net. That's actually ours, that's our responsibility. But we were happy with that, and we bought the house and we moved in and we had our first child about 9 months later or so, and started our life, and everything was wonderful. And that community, Overlook at Park Hill, and being there, that location has given us the opportunity just to grow up and raise our family in the most wonderful neighborhood. Just absolutely fantastic. It's not like any other neighborhood. It backs up to 155 acres of open space, and it's owner-occupied. So there's not any like that in Denver, and we're so proud of it. For that reason, and others, when we found out the open space was in jeopardy, we got a little bit angry. And that kind of brings us to today. We're not angry that it's not going to be a golf course necessarily. We're not angry at our home values. We're particularly angry because, the taxpayers of Denver were given a promise for this conservation easement. And my neighborhood was established because of that conservation easement. KB Homes wouldn't have come in and built our community if there wasn't a conservation easement in place. So we also realized quickly that we were angry because my community has spent over $400,000 since 2002 maintaining our presence as a golf course community. That's a lot of money. We had to pay for the initial net. We had to pay for all those poles. We've had to maintain it. We had to pay for a split rail fence. We've had to maintain the easement. And that's a lot of money. And it's very concerning. We have 123 residents, and everybody shares my concern over there. So rewind a little bit. In April of 2014, we kind of saw the writing on the wall, and we saw what we were spending on net maintenance. It was costing us about $7,000 a year to repair the net and maintain our easement. And we started looking into what's the future of our barrier net. Should we spend $100,000 and replace it? We looked at options to try to have it removed, to put in a chain link fence. And we knew that we needed to start asking some of the players what's going to happen, because Arcus's lease was going to be up in 2018, and our net needed to be replaced. So there was two big key factors that we had to deal with. We started by reaching out to Denver City Council to see what we could find out, and we were told by Denver City Council President and our district representative at the time, they had no reason to believe that the golf course was in jeopardy. It should continue. And of course they encouraged us to reach out to the other players. So we did, but both the president and our district representative confirmed the conservation easement and confirmed that it was in place and it's going to protect us forever. We next reached out to Clayton, who, said, hey, that's our biggest asset, and we need that money to continue what we do for our kids. And they didn't have any reason for us to stop our plight to replace the net. And so that left us with Arcus. We reached out to Arcus. We met with the GM personally. We talked to his parent company. And we made sure that it wasn't going to be a mistake to spend $100,000 on the net. And they confirmed that they plan on renewing their lease. So we thought we had covered our bases, and I reported back to the community that all the players think that golf is going to continue, and we're safe to spend the money and replace our net. So we did, and we were pretty comfortable with that decision. For a couple years, and then in 2016 we were contacted by Clayton, and they had a slightly different story to tell at that time. For whatever reason, we found out, that our nearly $500,000, a significant portion of that, was spent after confirming with all the key players that we were safe, and I'm not sure we were safe. And we're not anti-Clayton. We're not anti-kids that need help. But we feel like there might have been some deception there, because I know what I was told. My wife knows what she was told when we bought that place. We know what we were told when we went to spend $100,000 and replace that net. We know that Clayton had to sell what's now Park Hill Village. We know that they got some money for the conservation easement. We know that they got money when KB Homes came in and built our little tract of land. We know that they got some money when RTD needed some fast tracks, and we know that they might sell more. So we know Clayton's cause is a great one, and we support the kids and all they do for teachers. It's unbelievable. But my community has kids, and Park Hill Village has kids, and Park Hill and Denver all have kids, and we all have teachers, and I want to support them. My 11-year-old daughter looks out her window every night, every day, and she looks at that green space, and she told me, Dad, don't let them take this. And she knows that I've been going to meetings, and this has been a big part of my life for 4 years. I've spent an incredible amount of time making sure that we protect our community, our assets, our family, what my daughter wants. And I think that I'm only one person, one family, one voice, but I think I'm just like you. And I think if you had daughters, you would be interested in doing the same thing. So let's plan for the future. Let's make this right. Let's plan for our kids. And with the number of people moving to Denver, with one of the healthiest economies, with one of the lowest unemployment rates in the whole country, we know people are not going to stop moving here. And I love this place. Okay, I want to keep it a big, beautiful open space for everyone, for my fifth generation kids, for you. And I want to invite you all to come visit us at the Overlook Park Hill anytime you want, one afternoon, and you will realize how awesome we are and what a wonderful thing it could be for all of us. So please help me plan for my kids, for her kids, and for your kids.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming today. I appreciate the engagement. I'm going to start with a quick story. A friend of mine recently moved to Denver with his fiance. They knew no one except me. They had no jobs lined up. I asked him, why did you move out here? Your family members are scattered all across the country, in Oregon, California, New York. He said they were drawn to Denver for the healthy lifestyle. The sun, the mountains, the community, the diversity, the climate. They wanted to experience a place outside their comfort zones. But it was a quick stop. Figure 2 years tops, then they'd move on. They'd get married and settle near family. Well, as the old story goes, 2 years quickly became 5. They bought their first home here, terrified. No idea if it was a smart decision. No idea if it was in a good enough neighborhood. They got resistance from family. It was stressful. So I asked him again, why are you here? You're always traveling to see family. Taxes are going up. Things are getting more expensive. Traffic is getting worse. You're annoying the natives. He said, because it's worth it. Don't blame me for picking a place of beauty to call my home. You see, as hard as it was for them to leave behind the ones they love most, the cities they're familiar with, they wanted a place to call home, a place like Denver. And just this past December, he threw a big surprise party for his now wife. Their house was full to the brim, 70 people, dogs, babies, food, drink. And I laughed. I said, how did all this happen? How did you take such an unfamiliar city and make it a home? And he simply said, opportunity. I saw opportunity just like my grandfather saw opportunity when he came through Ellis Island from Italy. Just like my parents saw opportunity when they moved from the big city to the suburbs to raise a family. I'm just part of the process, he said. It's called progress. And I look at Denver as my generation's version of opportunity, just like so many people in this room. He said, look around. The majority of people are from other places. They left behind cities they once called home because the values were no longer aligned. They stayed here for the opportunities and the values that this city has provided. The perfect balance between city and nature, the healthy lifestyle, the sunny days, the food, the sports, the entrepreneurial spirit, the rich history, but most importantly, the diverse community. Turns out that friend, if you haven't already figured out, is me. I represent the young generation who's moved in and is currently popping out babies by the hour, ready to teach the next generation the incredible values that this city has blessed us with. And I believe this land, this 155 acres, is a microcosm of the values that drew us to this wonderful city. It's these values that are being threatened, that could get lost in the shuffle of a growing city, and I'm not going to sit around and let the city take them away. It's my mission to protect my community from the potential full development of this land, disrupting the peace, and adding to already dismal traffic and environmental concerns. So what's at stake? Our air quality. The Park Hill Golf Course sits on one of the most polluted zip codes in the country thanks to air pollution from I-70, Colorado Boulevard, Cherokee Power Plant, Globeville, Swansea, Commerce City, and other nearby commercial enterprises. Our diets. North Park Hill is one of the unhealthiest regions in the city. 1 in 2 adults and 1 in 3 children are overweight or obese. They lack access to fresh food choices and proper food education. Our lack of open space. We're living in a city that has less percentage of park space than DC, New York, and San Francisco. Denver parks make up 8% of the city, whereas DC is 22, New York 21, San Francisco 20. The city keeps a neighborhood equity index, which makes up socioeconomic conditions, mortality rates, and access to park and fresh food. North Denver neighborhoods rank least equitable. But I believe there's hope. In 1872, a landscape architect walked into a little-known city to map out a midtown park he said would serve as the lungs of the city. That park would go on to be called Central Park and not the one in Stapleton. The 155 acres isn't just another piece of land, it's an incredible opportunity for a city to remind its people that the values made it what it is today. This space has the ability to be the lungs of the city for Denver. There's a buzz about this place. On a nice sunny day, and apparently we get a few of them, everyone is outside. I drive down Colorado and 35th, smiling at all the groups outside. They're out there, they're enjoying life, they're alive. I walk down the path between the homes and the driving range, and countless residents are outside. It's a community feel, it's camaraderie, it's rare, it's priceless this day and age, and we must fight to protect it. I'm the young generation who flooded into your town looking for opportunity. I'm the generation who could care less about a lit-up sign, welcome sign at DIA that the city spent over $10 million on for ad space. The beautiful mountains are a big enough welcome sign. This area is sacred. It's surrounded by a diverse community of families, young couples, and old-time natives. I'm here to make sure this land is protected if it no longer remains a golf course. My ask for the community and for Denver's use is for green open space, a park with a trail system, urban farms, and a solar farm. Open space parks. Mayor Hancock has directly advocated for open space park, stating it leads to healthier communities. Time spent outdoors in natural environments near one's home promotes emotional well-being and correlates positively with increased physical activity, something North Park Hill desperately needs. More trees would reduce air pollution and stormwater runoff, the energy costs associated with heating and cooling buildings, and carbon sequestration. For every dollar spent on creating and maintaining trails, you're saving $3 in healthcare expenses. And Mayor Hancock has a food vision in place, which includes 99 acres of agricultural production, 57% reduction in residential food waste, a 44% increase in number of community and school gardens, educational urban farms, and edible landscapes in low to moderate income and high density neighborhoods. If this isn't the land for it, Mayor, what is the land? Urban farms would create jobs, produce organic and biodiverse agriculture that restores soil health, sequesters carbon from the atmosphere, retains water, reduces runoff, and provides healthy, nutritious food for the local residents. They would also provide educational classes about healthy cooking, gardening, and food preservation for our young youth who is in dire need of these things. A solar farm, 10 acres, would serve up to 500 homes with clean and safe renewable energy. It would lower energy costs and reduce excessive greenhouse gas emissions. In a city that gets 300 days of sunshine a year, I think this is a no-brainer. So I want you to understand, Clayton Early Learning, and we share similar missions. I couldn't be more supportive of their mission to advance early childhood education and to ensure optimal development for the kids. I think it's amazing what they do. But I ask, how will these children be affected by developments of this land? How will the nearby residents, many of whom are children, be affected by development? We're saying it's for the kids of Clayton Early Learning at the expense of thousands of individuals. And in order to reach their goal of ensuring optimal development, it starts with physical and mental health. It starts with ensuring their physical surroundings support that mission. As an individual who will be directly affected by what happens to this land, as a husband to a future pregnant wife and future children, I tell you what contradicts this mission, what is not for the children, and what doesn't help individuals reach optimum development. And that's air pollution, poor physical health, poor nutrition, and lack of outdoor spaces that bring communities together. With great city growth comes great responsibility. This city and the decisions they make with this land will have a direct impact on the future generations of Denver. The mayor says he supports open space and urban farms. Let's see him act on it. If the city cares remotely about preserving the amazing values that made Denver great, they would step in to protect this land so all parties involved get something positive out of it. And if they don't, they are doing it at the expense of the younger generation's health, well-being, and opportunity to rise and thrive. Thank you.
So our last two speakers did go over their time. I am going to grant Charlotte extra time should she need it.
Thank you. So good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. And I really appreciate all the comments of my fellow panel members up here. We share a lot of the same concerns. As you said, We've got a shared mission here about the kids, and you're absolutely right about that. I just want to thank you all for this opportunity to be here today and to tell you more about why this particular piece of land and its future uses are so important to Clayton Early Learning. I believe everyone in this room, if you didn't know before you came here, you certainly know now, but at its core, it is an asset of the Clayton Trust, which was established in 1899 upon the death of Mr. Clayton. It was originally a dairy farm. You might not know that. It was agricultural land. And little boys who were coming to the Clayton College for Boys, which is what we used to be known as in the early days, they were being taught dairy farming skills on that land. It was turned into a golf course by the city. And why the city? The city was the original trustee of Mr. Clayton's trust. The city functioned in that role for the first 85 years after his death. And at that point in time, they were making a very conscious decision that as an asset of the Clayton Trust, at its core, it's there to support the kids, the beneficiaries of the trust. How could it also be used at that time to benefit the larger community? It could make money as golf to support the kids. It could also support the larger community. So that decision was made, and it opened in about 1930 as the Park Hill Golf Course. As a golf course, however, in today's world, it's no longer generating the income needed to sustain our programming. The tenant on the course, Arcus Golf, they simply do not clear enough money at the end of every fiscal year to cover the full amount of the rent. They actually got behind in that rent for about 6 months a few years ago, and had in fact been telling us that they were not interested in continuing to run a losing money operation, and we didn't think they would re-up that lease. They have told us now, they haven't refused, but they have told us now that they want to wait until July 1st to tell us for sure. And while that rental income seems to be a small percentage of our annual operating budget, it is about 7 or 8%. It's actually nearly half of the unrestricted glue that holds together the restricted grant funds that we receive. We're primarily a grant-funded institution, public and private grants, and that 7% represents a very important but small amount of money that we can use to not only help maintain our 20-acre campus and its 12 historic buildings to the benefit of this community, but to also be able to glue together all of those federal and state and local grants and contracts. It's what makes our programming possible, and I'd be happy to address that further in the discussions later if anyone wants to ask any questions about that. Much of the conversation in the local media over the past couple of weeks in your community outreach from INC and those of you sponsoring today's forum, and of my fellow presenters on this panel this afternoon, a lot of it has been about the potential loss of open space and concerns about that. At Clayton Early Learning, we highly value natural environments, access to gardening, tree canopy, fields of grass, and active recreation. In the past dozen years or so, we've planted nearly 100 additional trees on our 20-acre campus at Colorado and Martin Luther King. We've installed more than 40,000 square feet of sod. We've built 32 garden beds that feed our children and families throughout the summer, and created recreational and play spaces that incorporate the natural environment. But there are other kinds of losses in parts of this community that you may not see in your daily lives and your routines. I'll tell you about what the children in this community who qualify for our program stand to lose every day of their lives. 1 in 4 live in families that worry about running out of food, sometimes or often. 1 in 4 live in families that actually ran out of food at least once in the past year. Literally could not feed their children at least once in the past year. Nearly 20% of their moms are screened as at risk of depression. Many of their families struggle to afford the basics we all take for granted, such as diapers, formula for their babies, and bus fare. Many live in zip codes where high school on-time 4-year graduation rates are, while rising, still less than 70%. 3 or 4 of those kids out of every 10 don't finish high school on time. Their ability to stay in the near neighborhoods is decreasing, likely due to the rapid rise in housing costs, and nearly 1 in 10 of these children live in families that are homeless for at least some period of the school year. So for the children lucky enough to get a space in our program at Clayton Early Learning, we add extra protein to their meals on Fridays and Mondays because we don't know for sure what they're going to get to eat over the weekend. The quality of the mostly organic food prepared in our school kitchen, combined with the active outdoor play spaces on our campus, result in our children having the lowest body mass index of any group of Head Start kids in Denver. So we're addressing that obesity that you mentioned as well, Jeff. We harvest the produce from our gardens and allow the families to take it home. We provide bread distribution once a week, baby formula, and have an on-campus food bank. We provide diapers for families who cannot afford them and keep a small supply of clothing for those children who need it. We partner with each family to help the adults create a plan for how they will attain the education and skills needed to become and stay gainfully employed. So we have a whole family emphasis. It's not just on the kids. And we work together with them to ensure they are fully prepared to continue advocating for their children throughout their K-12 school careers. We at Clayton Early Learning have been actively inviting members of this community for almost 1.5 years now to help us find the right vision for the future of this land. Again, an asset of the Clayton Trust. A vision that will ensure it continues to be an asset for all who live near the land now and who might want to live here in the future. A vision that ensures families don't have to move away just to keep from becoming homeless. A vision that ensures access for everyone to quality parkland with recreational opportunities as well as wild natural spaces. And in fact, the flyer that I know people were receiving in the Park Hill community, many of you in this room probably have this, the pictures of the kinds of recreational opportunities that are on this flyer are things that we support as well. We believe there's plenty of room over there. We want to see a vision that ensures that the disadvantaged children, the trust and its assets are there to support, will be given the opportunity to reach their full potential for generations to come through our programming. Our invitation is open to all of you in this room, and I look forward to continuing to hear your ideas. Many of you have heard me say we're trying to strike that right balance between the income that this asset of the Clayton Trust must generate in order to serve the children who are facing disadvantages and limited opportunities in our Denver community, while also seeing how we can collectively see what we can do with this land that will serve everyone's needs. We see this at Clayton as a both and, not as a two-sided issue or an either or, but as a both and I welcome all of your input. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Wells, and my purpose today is to describe why the transformation of the Park Hill Golf Course to a park is a really grand idea. And now, why do we need parks, and why do we need more parks? Parks confer social, environmental, economic, and health benefits. Park acres in our city lag behind those at other similar communities. Parkland helps us to combat the causes and the consequences of climate change. And parks, as a part of an expanding green infrastructure, promote implementation of the city's existing climate commitments and park commitments, as well as realize the desires of its population. So just what are these benefits of parks? In 2005, the Trust for Public Land published a very important paper for this country. In this paper, they reviewed all of the existing research on the benefits of parks. And they concluded that parks provide opportunities for recreation, play, social connection. Parks remove air pollution, reduce heat, filter pollution in water, control stormwater runoff. Parks increase the economic value of residential and community properties near them. They revitalize neighborhoods and they increase tourism. Parks also enhance health, help people combat obesity, and exposure to nature enhances mental health, an underappreciated benefit of parks, I believe. So where do we stand in Denver? When the Trust for Public Land evaluated the status of parks in the 100 biggest U.S. cities, they found Denver to have a rank of 20. That's below Minneapolis, which was the most highly ranked city in the United States, but also below Portland, which has a similar population, which had a rank of 5. So while it's pretty good, we can do better. And here is the pressing concern. Without aggressive acquisition of parkland, over time, the number of park acres as a percent of Denver's population is going to shrink. For example, Denver grew between 2010 and 2015 by 13.8%, and faster in 2015 than 50 of the most populous U.S. cities. Denver is projected to have over 800,000 residents by 2015, and over 60% increase in population from 2015. Now, the Denver Mayor and City Administration absolutely understands this. In Denver Mayor Hancock's mayoral State of the City address this past year, he said, in a city nearing 700,000 people, it's never been more important to protect, preserve, and grow our parks and recreational opportunities. And you know, citizens all over the United States agree with this sentiment. In a large-scale 2015 national study conducted by the University of Pennsylvania, they found high levels of park use, park enjoyment, and wish for more parks on the part of populations. And that includes the population in Denver. A passion for local public parks and recreation has remained consistent over the past quarter century, study authors concluded. Now, the issue here is not only about the benefits of parks or about the need for more parks. The issue here is that parks exist in the context of rising global greenhouse gas emissions and a changing climate. Where are we with respect to global greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere? Now, I know you can't see the numbers on this slide, but you can see the line. In 2018, early this year, we reached 408 parts per million, meaning for every million particles of air, there were 408 molecules of carbon dioxide. If unchecked, in 50 years, we will reach 500 parts per million, leading to threats to our global food supply, mass migration, political instability, among other things. I don't know about you, but I feel really frightened when I see this chart, and I see it every week. Now, what is the meaning of increasing greenhouse gas concentrations for Denver? They're serious too. According to the Denver Climate Adaptation Plan of 2014, it's going to be hot, dry, drought conditions. The Rocky Mountain Climate Organization 2016 climate projections include the one that by 2059, Denver will have 35 days of 95 degrees or higher, and 77 days of the same by the end of the century. Our cities, including the city of Denver, are particularly vulnerable to escalating heat due to the urban heat island effect. Basically, that means that cities are, in this context of an increasingly hot world, are going to be hotter because of loss of natural vegetation, use of building materials that absorb and store energy, high density, and emission of waste heat from buildings and vehicles. How much hotter? Well, the EPA data show that in a city with 1 million people, the air can be anywhere between 2 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than the surrounding air temperature. And those numbers are even higher at night. Now, the leadership of the city understands this threat well. In a news release from the Denver office of the mayor of June 2017, confirming Denver's commitment to uphold the Paris Climate Accord, this note was made. The changing climate is a serious threat to our economy and way of life in Colorado, as we see increasing wildfires, flooding, drought, and decreasing snow cover. Poor air quality and extreme heat impacts public health, especially for our most vulnerable populations. So, parkland can help with some of this. And even though trees, soil, vegetation can't absorb all of this greenhouse gas, they are important tools. For example, trees take in oxygen and produce the oxygen we breathe. Trees take in carbon dioxide and produce the oxygen we breathe. 1 acre of forest absorbs 6 tons of CO2 and puts out 4 tons of oxygen. Trees also remove dust and other air pollutants. Cindy, go ahead and advance and skip that guy. Yeah, okay. So given the critical role that parks play in taking in carbon dioxide, by providing shade, by cooling the air, and given that, according to Denver's Climate Action Plan of 2015, without aggressive action, Denver likely will not meet its 2020 climate goal, let alone continue on a downward trajectory. We need all the parks we can get. We need all the tools in our toolbox to fight climate change, and parks are one of those. So, in conclusion, creation of a large park in Denver would allow us to seize a rare golden opportunity to create within the limits of a landlocked city a new park with all its attending benefits. Creation of a large park within the city limits would contribute to the development of the green infrastructure needed to combat climate change and to meet the city's existing climate commitments, including those in our 2015 Climate Action Plan. Creating a large park within the city would reconnect our contemporary park efforts to achievements of the past, when Denver and its then mayor Spear exemplified the best of the City Beautiful movement. So thank you.
So there will be a Q&A time period. It can go to the entire panel or any one member of the panel. I will ask that if you have comments, please keep them short and get to your question quickly. There will be cards that are being collected if you don't want to come to the microphone directly. Woody, where are the microphones for? Okay. You will be able to ask your question directly, and I do ask that you be respectful. I unfortunately have already witnessed one episode of this today, and it will not be tolerated. So, So I have a couple of cards in my hand. Is anybody ready to ask a question personally? Yes, sir.
I'd like to make this question to the general panel, whoever can answer. Since this is sponsored by INC, I'm curious to understand with your scope going all the way out to Esponcia, Commerce City, and then the Park Hill area, how is it that we don't have any representation on this panel from the African American community that lives right next door to the property that we're talking about? My second question is, why are you pushing so strongly to cause the community have to decide one or the other when there's 155 acres that can provide open space and housing for people who need to come out of the open space so they're no longer homeless and can find a place to live.
It's open to any of you. Who would like to start to take this question?
Thanks for the question. I'm with Overlook at Park Hill, so not directly INC, but I do live right on the golf course, and I have been looking at this and investigating this for longer than anyone, 4 years in fact. My community and my board have more time into this than anyone, and we're certainly concerned about what you mentioned, and we certainly are interested in those opportunities, but there was a handshake. There was a deal, and we're interested first and foremost in that deal, and we want someone to address the same questions I've been asking for 4 years. You just asked me a question, but what about my questions that I've been asking for 4 years? I still don't have an answer.
And I just will comment. I mean, I want to thank you, Pastor Dell, for your comment. As you know, we serve on the committee that Clayton has established that's been talking about it. And, you know, there is no doubt that affordable housing is a big issue for Denver. I mean, you know, we could have a whole forum on just that. But I think the purpose was to make clear that there also is a need for a discussion on the open space and park issues. And part of the frustration through the Clayton process has been that the assumption has been that there will be some sort of development with hopefully affordable housing that has been coming out of it. And the conservation easement and the open space issues really, I think, had been shoved to the side. And that, I think, from my perspective, I was not intimately involved in the establishment of exactly who was on this panel, but that is clearly my perspective. And, you know, as you know, we've had that discussion at Charlotte's Forum, you and I directly about that process. So, thank you.
Is there any reason there's no African American
I don't know.
Yeah, we asked the mayor, the president of the city council, and
So, time out. So, Lamone Noles is the MC of today's event. I will ask this question. Do we know the answer to that?
we invited the president of the city council, we invited our district representative, and we invited the mayor. They couldn't come, but we invited them. So maybe that question should be directed towards them. Why didn't they come? They would have been part of the panel.
Okay, so thank you for that response, Kevin. So the next question's for Charlotte. I'm sorry, did you want to comment?
I wanted to respond.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you, Tracey. Thank you very much. So just a couple of things that I would like to add to that conversation. This is not about who's a member of the panel, but a couple of the other comments that were made. I just want to be clear here that we are very, very aware at Clayton Early Learning that there are currently use restrictions on this land. Those use restrictions are there right now in the form of the agency agreement that is a contract between us and the city of Denver. And those use restrictions do in fact exist, and they would have to be removed by city council. That is correct. Also just want to comment that if you cycle back about 20 years ago when the conversations were being had about should this land remain a golf course or not, at that point in time it was successfully operating as golf. It was generating the income that was needed by the trust. People didn't anticipate that the golf industry would have been declining in this period of time in the last 20 years, but it has in fact done that. We have reached out to 3 different golf industry experts to get their take on it, and while there are some communities in this country and in this city where golf is still clearly a highly well running operation that generates plenty of income, that's not true of a lot of other courses, and particularly one of this size. So that was what also led us as the trust. We are the fiduciary entity responsible for leveraging those dollars and using them according to the donor's intent. And it's what caused us to start doing our due diligence about this land and what could it become in the future. So I just wanted to make that clear. Second point I want to make clear is that we also have heard from a number of people.
People back can't hear.
We have also heard from a number of people in the community that there are people here, yes, we understand, who are very, very interested in the 100% of it being open space. There are also a lot of other people who have told us they are very, very interested in mixed uses, in more of a both and. And so while it may seem that we have had an agenda of mixed use, from Clayton Early Learning, we are open to what the community is looking at and what the community would like to see here. And we have had a lot of people tell us that they would like to see things in addition to recreation and open space on that land.
There are many worthy and actually profound needs within the city of Denver, including the need for open space and
Just put it really close
Yeah.
to your mouth.
can you hear me
You're a
now?
rock star.
Okay. Is it?
And then speak up.
Is this better? Yeah, this is off. Okay. There are many competing, worthy, and indeed profound needs in the city of Denver, including the need for open space, affordable housing, mass transit, and I could go on. It's my own view, however, that it doesn't help any issue to construct them as competing polarities. When we say it's open space versus affordable housing, or affordable housing versus gardening, I don't think that contributes to the community dialogue on each of these issues in the long run. We need implementation of open space for a wide variety of reasons. We also need implementation of an aggressive plan for housing. But pitting them against one another, I do not think helps either one.
Time out. The next question's for Charlotte. It reads, in 1997, Clayton perpetually relinquished the development rights for the Park Hill Golf Course land in exchange for $2 million. How can Clayton now justify having any right to develop the land and receive $24 million or more from land sales?
And thank you for that question. So again, I'm not sure that it's Clayton's right to do that. I want to be very clear that in that time period, yes, the Clayton Trust was given $2 million by the city of Denver. I was not present then, by the way, but not to say that would have made any difference. I've been there about 12 years. That $2 million was exchanged. At that point in time, my understanding is that the city was actually interested in purchasing the land to perhaps keep it as golf. I'm not sure what the city's intent would have been to have done with it at that point in time. There wasn't sufficient money available to purchase it outright at that point, and the trust was offered the $2 million to keep it as golf at that point in time. Again, 20 years ago, golf was a viable use of that asset of the Clayton Trust. As we've moved forward now, we can see that golf is probably not the highest and best use of that land on behalf of the beneficiaries of the trust. We, as the fiduciary responsible party in leveraging the assets of Mr. Clayton's trust, have to look at how can we use that land to benefit the children and continue to benefit this community. We want to do both of those things. We again see this as a both and that's what we're trying to accomplish here. So we appreciate your input.
There was a question back here. There's a mic to your right, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Joe Morrow. I have a brief comment and then a question. I would suggest that the city has completely given up its responsibility around addressing climate change and its 2030 goals with the massive excavation that's happening at City Park Golf Course. That there is an extraordinary, thank you. There's an extraordinary release of CO2 with this huge excavation. So the city is paying lip service to this. I think it takes it completely out of this conversation of any responsibility. But let me ask my question. I understand that, and I'm sorry that the city could not provide any representatives on the panel today to directly, thank you, to directly address this to, perhaps Ms. Brantley can address it. Otherwise, I'll just put it out there. I understand that Bruce James of Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schreck law firm was the co-chairman of Mayor Hancock's 2 election campaigns, and that he and the Brownstein law firm have represented the mayor on personal matters. Now that Mr. James and the Brownstein law firm are now representing Clayton on the Park Hill Golf Course land issues, how can Denver citizens be confident that their interests are being fully protected when Clayton negotiates with the Hancock administration on Park Hill Golf Course land issues? Does this pass the conflict of interest smell test?
Sure. Thank you.
So thank you for that question. So I just want to point out that, yes, we have an attorney. He does work for Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, Schreck. That is correct. We have been for a year, almost a year and a half now. We started in November of 2016, reaching out one-on-one. Some of the people are here in this room that we reached out to back that long ago to start this community conversation. We are sincerely interested in what the community would like to see happen on this land, that again would bring that balance between it's an asset of the Clayton Trust at its core. We are beholden to the probate court. It's an asset of the Clayton Trust. It has to support the beneficiaries of that trust, who are the children with limited opportunities that you might not see every day in your daily lives. They're here, trust me. We see them all the time. It has to benefit those children. We have been reaching out to this community with sincerity for quite some time now to ask for your input about what would you like to see there, and then how do we balance what everyone would like to see on that land. And trust me, it's not all the same thing. We don't have 100% of people telling us one thing about it. We have a lot of different ideas that have bubbled up, and we're wanting to look at how can we strike that balance between this land has to support the beneficiaries of this trust, and what could it do to further benefit this community now and in the future.
Bridget. Thank you very much, Charlotte, for being here today on the hot seat. I understand that the conservation easement, Clayton received $2 million, but it also received tax benefits. That's one of my questions. How much in tax benefits have you received? And the second question would be the drainage that Clayton has arranged with the city, the drain. That's to keep I-70 from flooding. And we want to know, well, where do the children live that you're benefiting? The children who live around I-70 have 40% higher rates of asthma. Their families suffer heart disease. Do any of your client children live in these areas where many poor children live? It's sort of strange that the drain is going to benefit something that is going to not be healthy for these children.
First of all, let me address the tax question you asked, Bridget. So keep in mind that from Mr. Clayton's death in 1899 until 1984, roughly, the city of Denver was the trustee of his trust. And as a city entity, being the trustee of parcels of land, there was no property tax due because the city doesn't pay itself property tax. So in 1985 or so, when the Clayton, originally called the Clayton Foundation, how many of you in this room know us as the Clayton Foundation from back in the day? So when the Clayton Foundation, which we now officially our name is Clayton Early Learning, was incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit in the mid-80s to both become the trustee of the trust at the request of the probate court and to then make all decisions and run all the programming to benefit the beneficiaries of the trust. Time just sort of rocked along, and no one paid any attention to whether or not that land, as an asset of a trust being now managed by someone other than the city, might be subject to property tax. It's because it's not put to a direct charitable use, it's sort of an indirect. We receive income from it, but the daily use is not directly a charitable use. It was seen that, oh, well, okay, legally it should be subject to property tax. But rather than burdening the trust with now all of a sudden after 85 years there was no property tax to have to be paid, all of a sudden now there was. That was what kicked into place the agency agreement that's in place now. That the end result of that agency agreement is that we pay a possessory interest tax on it, but we don't pay the full property tax. I don't have in my head the actual amount. We'd have to go back and look at several years of history of what that assessment would have been to be able to answer the actual monetary value of it. But the point being that there was no tax for 85 years. And then just because of the legalities of now it was no longer the city being the trustee, it was this separate 501 charitable educational nonprofit, excuse me, that's what kicked into place the agency agreement, which set aside the conservation easement but kept in place those use restrictions. So there's that piece. In terms of where do our children live, yes, they live in neighborhoods of high poverty. Obviously, their kids living in poverty. They're eligible for Head Start and Early Head Start, about 95% of them are, so they're living in very low income households. As we are not the I-70 people. We're talking about the golf course. There are people here who perhaps would be able to answer any of those kinds of questions, but this is not about it. Well, I really am not informed about all that to get into that kind of a discussion. I'm here to talk about Clayton Early Learning and what it is that this asset, this golf course land, does for Clayton Early Learning. Thank you.
So, question from the card. If a conservation easement is in perpetuity, according to state law, how can the city, if it acquires the property, rescind the easement?
Well, I think it's very clear. City Council and, of course, with the administration, the mayors, they have the legal right to change the agency agreement and the conservation easement. Typically, when you hear about conservation easements in land preservation efforts, there's lots of sort of tax issues and strings that make it very difficult for the landowner and the holder of the easement to come together and dissolve them. Those don't exist in this situation. And I think we need to be real open and honest and understand that it is a political sort of question. The city's got the ability to solve the conservation easement, and indeed that's what the contract back between Clayton and the city released back in September proposed. That's quite possible. And I do want to just sort of juxtapose that to how we look at our park system in general. The city charter provides that with designated city parks, before that park can be disposed of or whatever, there has to be a vote of the people. And that sort of protection isn't there. Instead, it is up to our elected representatives, city council and the mayor's office to decide the fate of the conservation easement. And that's what we citizens are here to sort of discuss and give feedback to our elected folks.
I live here in Park Hill. I grew up in Denver. There are representatives from the city here, sitting right over here in the front, I believe. Happy Haynes happens to be one of them. And my question is this, and I'm not sure we've got people on the panel that can answer some questions. My question is, ARCIS is supposed to make a decision in July. Okay, but if the city's going to take 25 acres of the golf course, who's going to reconfigure that golf course? And will it, like City Park, you won't necessarily see a reservoir there. Is that the same for this particular golf course?
I think Nancy Kuhn from the city is here, but I'll just quickly say, we've asked that question of what will happen, and the city's position is at this point in time they intend to reconfigure that as a golf course. And you're right, there won't be any sort of lake or open pond. It's going to be very much sort of like City Park. But perhaps Nancy here from the city could give more discussion as to exactly what will happen.
Thank you. Hi, Nancy Kuhn with Denver Public Works. That is correct, Brad, thank you. We do have money in the budget to restore the golf course. That is the intent, and that is the plan. So we have money to put in the stormwater improvements, and then there is funding in the real estate budget to do the restoration, and that's the current plan. We have not begun much design yet on the Park Hill Golf Course area. That won't happen till probably mid this year, where we will start on that and have a community input as part of that design process. And no construction would begin on the site till 2019. So that's the current plan.
So I have a card question. How is creating a regional park to which people must drive from their homes more responsible than building a walkable neighborhood which reduces the need for car ownership and car trips?
I'll take the first crack at this. Well, one of the things that we didn't have time to talk about is this is a great opportunity for regional park because it's got access to the A line. The 40th Avenue and Colorado Boulevard station provides an excellent opportunity for people from downtown to take rapid transit and be within a short walk of what would be a regional park. Because clearly we don't want the idea that people are going to be driving. I mean, we really view this as an opportunity for a regional sort of park that let's face it, the tens of thousands of people that are moving into all of those apartments downtown would be able to have access via mass transit to this park.
Anyone else?
Can I interject for a moment? It might make it easier if people who have questions could come and line up over this way instead of us zigzagging across the room. It makes it very difficult in a fair and orderly fashion to answer the questions, and that way there's not all over the room. So if you could do that, I would appreciate it. Thanks.
One of the things that hasn't been mentioned is that Park Hill is a food desert. There's no grocery stores in the area. It's been that way for too long, and that needs to be addressed. I am the Imam of Northeast Denver Islamic Center. We're less than half a block from the golf course, so this is a particular concern to us. Can someone address it?
I am not a grocery store expert, so I'm just going to tell you what I've been told. I know that there was a Safeway here in the past and a King Soopers, and they are gone. They've been gone for a long time. I've lived here 12 years, and I think they were gone long before that, right? So my understanding is that efforts have been made to get a grocer to relocate or to a new one to locate in the community. My understanding as well is that there hasn't been a sufficient plot of land on which to do that. There was negotiation with the Walgreens that's on Colorado Boulevard. The Walgreens has some fresh with a little F food if you happen to go on the day it's been delivered. It's fresh food. I hope there's no one here from Walgreens. I don't mean to be offensive, but it is not a grocery store. It's really not creating that kind of access. So it is an identified food desert. That is absolutely correct. And it's one of the reasons why we come on over and see them, our garden beds on the Clayton campus. We'd love to have you come and take a look at it. They're beautiful. We actually have a partnership with a landscape firm here in Denver who is tending some of those gardens for us all summer long to make sure that our children and their families are being given access to fresh and healthy food. So we too would like to see that addressed in one way or another on the future of this land.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dan. I'm a resident over at 30th and Forest, and I just have a comment and then a question, a concern to the panel. And so the comment is to Charlene and the Clayton Early Learning, and it's just to commend the great work that you are doing on behalf of disadvantaged children, and the sort of, I think, very thoughtful way in which you're considering how your asset will, has to be used to benefit those kids and, the community at large and, the various needs that exist in the community. So then turning to that concern and question is that in the conversations that there was a proposal, another open space conversation going on related to a very small little park proposed over at on Fairfax near 28th. And even though that was about a little park, a pocket park, as part of a development, at least half of the questions that came from the audience were about gentrification of that neighborhood and in that neighborhood. And so I feel as though the fact that this meeting was called and billed as about open space has attracted maybe not a representative audience in terms of the concerns that exist in the community around gentrification and displacement in this neighborhood. And I feel like that is something that I wanted, and I feel like the panel and the way that this program has been billed as relating to open space, I understand that there's an easement that is, sparking that, but at the same time, nobody at all on that issue. So I feel it's, a little bit of an oversight, a concern, and a question as to why, and wanting to represent how deeply held and how much that conversation came in on a really unrelated conversation about in that other project.
Are there comments from the panel? Okay, Kathleen?
I would just say to remind us all that parks, the benefits of parks are not unique to one income group. And so in the context of this conversation, I think it's fair to say that it is not, just that parks benefit people equally, irrespective of income level and any other ascriptive characteristic. And poorer parts of the city need parks just as much as other parts of the city. So, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Elaine Granata. I'm an urban farmer, and I'm a member of the Mile High Farmers, which is part of the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. One of our visions for this would be at least 25-acre working urban farm. And we'd like to throw that into the pot for consideration. It's been mentioned. We see it as an opportunity to create jobs. An incubator farm would actually create an opportunity for people who want to learn to be a farmer, to farm. There would be a farm stand and something called CSAs where people can buy food. So we see this as an opportunity to provide food in a food desert. And it isn't a grocery store, which is what people often think about, but farms are where our food come from. And it offers all the benefits of open space also. So we're really advocating for that. And my question is on the conservation easement. I'm understanding state law says an easement is in perpetuity. How can the city, I'm not sure I understand, Brad understood your answer. How can the city rescind an easement if state law defines a conservation easement as something that's in perpetuity?
I can also answer that. Okay.
I really wish I could say that, that the city can't do that. But in my opinion, certainly the city and Clayton can come together in agreement and decide to do away with the conservation easement. State law says, certainly provides a lot of framework for a conservation easement, but in my opinion, it does not mandate that they cannot be dissolved or done away with by the parties. And this one certainly states it's in perpetuity, But that's an issue that our city council and the mayor, in conjunction with Clayton, have in my opinion, the legal authority to decide. So.
That's fine, I'm good. Okay. I would like to comment to Elaine. So Elaine, I don't know where you went to sit down. Great. I just want to say, first of all, it's great to see you again. We had a good conversation about the urban farming, and we've kept that in our hopper of potential things that could someday be on part of this 155 acres. We're just as interested in that, I believe, as you are, so thank you.
So I'm going to go back to the line here in a second. So next card says, rather than sacrificing existing green space to development, would it make better sense to build high-density housing, grocery stores, or additional retail on the west side of Colorado Boulevard? Either of you guys want to answer? Anyone?
The reason why I keep focusing on the open space is because of health. None of this matters if you're unhealthy. None of this matters if you're breathing in pollutant, if you're obese, if you're underground and at the age of 45. This city has got a health issue that's rising. Everyone's going to have their opinion of what they want, and I respect all of it. I'm just saying the city needs affordable housing, yes. The city needs a lot of things. But we also need our health, because we wouldn't even be here having a conversation if we didn't have good health to have these conversations. So this land is just, it's valuable because it's right in the middle of all this development. If you look at the map, it's ridiculous how much congestion there is. So I really believe that I welcome all these opinions, and we talk about it all the time as a food desert and all that. But none of it matters if I'm breathing in pollution every day. Simple as that.
Go to the line.
Before James steps up, if there's anyone in the audience that can't come up and stand in line because of a disability or they're hemmed in the aisle, certainly raise your hand and I'll make my way to you. So keep that in mind. I'm not forcing people to come up here. Just try to get my attention and I'll come to you. You're up, James.
Thank you. My name's James. Today in society, it's become the norm to pick an extreme side and to stick to your guns right now. And I think right now we need some extreme, an extreme difference of coming to the middle and really meeting each other and getting to solutions together. Disparities in Denver are growing, and I think that you got to recognize that. There are affordable housing situations that are creating displacement and all kinds of different problems within our city. And Northeast Park Hill, which is where this golf course sits, is the last predominant black community in Denver. So one thing, when you look at the setup of this panel, and with Charlotte being the only representative up there that is representing coming to the middle and talking about things, there's an issue here. And there's also a community process that has already started. So my question is, why has this panel and this event here undermined what has already been going on and taking place in a community process that has been more diverse than this?
Thanks for the question. I have the same question. I started this process 4 years ago, and I still haven't gotten answers. And I was the first one to start the process. So I don't find my thoughts representative of my community as an extreme. We are in the middle ground. We've been looking for the middle ground forever. We're the ones that have spent $500,000. Who else has spent $500,000? No one. We have. We want answers. And I think we can get them. And I think this visioning process is part of it, and I think this community meeting is part of it as well.
And the one thing I would like to add, I have been involved with the process that Clayton Early Learning started, been to all the forums, and we really, I think, have appreciated that attempt to have a dialogue. But the thing that we have constantly been pointing out is that that is a forum that essentially was set up by Clayton, and the folks who served on the committees were appointed by Clayton, and we really felt that there was a need for a discussion on the sort of the the open space sort of aspect of the issue. Is this the end-all forum? Well, I would hope not. And ultimately, as we've talked about, our elected representatives have to decide this question. But when I went to the second public forum that Clayton put on, and we played the ball and bucket game of development with absolutely no ability to have a good discussion from the public about the conservation easement, the need for parkland, we instead had to find enough money to fuel everything. It was clearly a need for more discussion about the open space issues, and that's what we're here to highlight.
Hi, I'm Danette Hollowell, and I live right on the border of the golf course. I'm curious, you said that parks and spaces, is very general, sort of serve benefits to everyone equally. I actually had a really hard time figuring out how that golf course served our poor communities, our homeless communities, if you are trespassing and or you need a membership of some sort, especially when we're in a community where rents are rising, things are getting more expensive. Maybe not even poor communities, just the community that can no longer afford a luxury such as a golf membership. Second, there's just a lot of grass there, so I'm also curious as to how we're sort of playing this into the global warming piece, because you need a lot of trees to make that claim. Third, you're using a lot of water to keep all of that flat grass green all the time. And I just don't see how that's serving the community, the entire community. I'm just curious if you can tell me how it's serving the poor community, the struggling communities with rising costs, and the homeless community. I'm just curious.
Well,
One that works.
I can't speak directly to how the golf course serves the whole community, but parks clearly serve the whole community, public parks. Excuse me?
Talking about the golf course? Are we talking about the golf course?
No, I can't speak to how the golf course relates to the whole community, but parks serve the whole community, public parks do. So I was confused by your question about the golf course, I guess.
So don't go away yet. So the question being is, maybe this is, if it wasn't in a golf course and a park, could you address how it serves the whole community? Is that fair?
Okay, I guess. I came in late. I didn't realize you were trying to make it so you're trying to make it a public park? Yes, with no development at all, just another park. Like more trees, lots more trees. But there's 155 acres, so an urban farm is out, and a farm? Okay, yeah, and an urban farm. None of it could be used for housing for homeless.
Okay. Does anybody on the panel? Okay.
So, and I appreciate you being here, and thanks for that question. What you're bringing up is exactly what we're trying to hear about from this community. What are the types of uses that this land could in fact be put to? What are the desires of this community? On 155 acres, we think it's a both and. We think there could be actually some true publicly accessible space. It isn't publicly accessible right now unless you want to pay a greens fee. That's absolutely right. So what would it look like if it had some true public parkland on it? How much of it should be true public parkland? Is there room for something else as well? That's what we at Clayton Early Learning are wanting to hear from the community, so thank you.
But housing is completely out?
No, nothing is completely out. Let me be very, very, very clear. Clayton Early Learning, as the trustee of the trust, this is an asset of the Clayton Trust. So we are the ones who are going to be beholden at the end of the day to probate court about what decisions get made on this land. We will have to answer a question to the probate court. How does XYZ, future of this land, benefit the beneficiaries of Mr. Clayton's trust? So that's got to be understood by the community as well. There is no plan yet for what that future will look like. We are waiting for our tenant on the course to tell us whether or not they will renew their lease. If they renew their lease, the city has already said that their plan is, well, then they'll have to turn it back into golf after the stormwater is built. If they don't renew their lease, that leaves it wide open to it could be something else. And that's why we want to hear right now from the community of what they would like to see. But there are no things that are not on the list, and there's no things that are definitely on the list. We're trying to create as broad a viewpoint here as possible about what the possibilities are.
And Clayton is basically responsible for making that decision, is what I'm getting.
At the end of the day, Clayton Early Learning will literally have to appear before the probate court of Denver to justify how this trust asset is being used. That is correct.
So David, we'll go to the next question.
Hi, my name is Bill Jurashek. I've lived here in Park Hill since 1975 and watched a lot of this stuff and participated occasionally. I really like the idea of why not put the housing, the low-income housing, on the west side of Colorado Boulevard, use up some of that open space around the lovely Clayton buildings. And that way you could serve the entire family of the people that they're not just their children. If they're homeless, they could live there while their children were being helped in the big red stone buildings. Has anybody ever thought of that?
So if you're talking about the 20-acre Clayton campus, the one thing I can tell you about that is that there would be yet more processes to go through, not to say we couldn't, but it's also a Denver landmark, and anything we do on that campus is subject to the Landmark Commission's approval. And so building housing on that campus, we'd have to go through a process to see whether or not that would be approved. It's not in the overall goal of that campus to add yet more buildings to it. We're trying to add more trees and more garden space on that campus at this point.
Okay.
So I just want to remind everybody, we have about 15 minutes, and I really do want to get to everybody's questions, including what's in my hand. So again, if we can just make our questions as concise as possible, that would be fantastic, and we'll go to you.
Hi, my name is Ian Thomas Tafoya. I am the co-chair of zoning and planning with Denver INC, and I'm the runner-up for District 9 City Council, which some of these neighborhoods are adjacent to. And I'm really frustrated, I guess, that we continually have to hear open space put in a dilemma against other really important uses, whether it be schools or food. Now, I serve as a zoning and planning person, and I'm curious as to why we have a Denver Moves and a blueprint and a 40th in Colorado and many, many parcels along Colorado that can be developed into a grocery store, into affordable housing. This is an opportunity of a lifetime to preserve a huge piece and swath of open space accessible to public transit, which I've been an advocate for. And my question is why we can't come to the middle, open this park for all, and use the other plans to mitigate a lot of these other issues that everybody else is worried about. Thank you.
I think that's what we're doing here. That's why we're bringing this up today, and this is why we welcome everyone's voice, because we don't want to see it 100% developed, and a lot of people here don't want to see it 100% open space. So that's why we have these discussions, is to look at all the, and I agree, there's a lot of space to develop up by 40th and north of there. So I think that's why we're here, and I appreciate your comment.
Hi, I'm Cecilia Underhill, and I live east of the Overlook where you live. So I want you to know that before your homes were developed, we had a beautiful plain view. It was fabulous. And KB Homes said to me, Cecilia, we cannot build invisible homes, which I wish they could have. But you all need to understand that area, it is beautiful. There's a lot of beautiful families in there. Yes, we're being gentrified, but that golf course, I like the idea of putting in the little farming area, putting in walking space and stuff, but bottom line is this, we need open space. We're not insects and we're not animals, and I hate to see all that wildlife get displaced. It's already been because of all of the work being done on the railway and all that stuff, so I would like for Clayton to please think about this. Open space and all that beautiful farming you want to do. And oh yeah, the solar, don't forget that. That would be excellent. So I just want you guys, and especially the politicians, to pay attention to us, because when those houses went in the Overlook, it was already done. We were just speaking to the air.
As a moderator, I'm supposed to remain neutral. This will be the only thing I will say. Thank you for the plug for renewable energy. That's just a general comment, not necessarily related to this. What are the terms of the lease renewal for Arcus? How much money per year? What process will be followed to assure future deliberations on this land use are truly open to the public and community and are transparent?
So in terms of the lease and its terms, it was originally negotiated in about 1997-98. It went into play in 1998. It was a 20-year fixed-fee lease that started out at about $500,000 a year, ramped up over the first 2-3 years to $700,000 where it is now. It's been the same $700,000 a year since about 2001. And as you might imagine, $700,000 today doesn't buy what it bought in 2001. So that's one of our challenges at Clayton about that. They have the option to renew that lease for 2 more 5-year terms. However, they cannot renegotiate that lease with us. In other words, they can't come to us and say, we want to renew it, but we're only going to renew it for $300,000 a year or $400,000 a year. They can't do that. They would have to come back in for the same $700,000 a year. We know from their financials that they share with us as their landlord that they do not clear that much in revenue every year now, which is why we had been talking with them about it for some time now, that they weren't really interested in continuing to take on that debt. Now they've told us they're not so sure, so just want to make that clear. And in terms of transparency, you know, this lease is a contract between a landlord and a tenant. It's not a public negotiation. I just want to be clear there. Any more than if any of you lease your homes, that negotiation you have with your landlord and you is between you and your landlord. It's not a public discussion for the entire community. The process that we have been going through to understand what the community would like to see happen with the future of this 155 acres, we have tried to be as transparent as possible about that. As soon as we had reached a potential way in which we could move forward on both the stormwater acquisition, the land needed for stormwater, and create a financial solution for the beneficiaries of this Clayton Trust, we announced that as quickly as we could. We also very transparently announced as quickly as we could in November, oh dear, Arcus has said, wait a minute, they're not ready to make their decision. So we have been trying to be as transparent as we can be in these processes. And again, I just really appreciate when the community will come forward and help us think about this. We will be announcing very soon here, we just told our Citizens Advisory Committee members, just got an email from us yesterday saying that we are going to be scheduling some additional community meetings, one in March and 3 more in April, and the last one is the 1st of May, that will be open to anyone, community roundtable meetings to dig into various sort of buckets, sorry Brad, to use the bucket, I won't say ball, but bucket, to use the various like groupings of like healthy, resilient, and accessible communities, for example. That's a topical area. We'll be digging into those topical areas on those evenings, and we hope that we get broad representation from the community at those meetings. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's still Joe Morrow, and I didn't get an answer to an earlier question. I understand that our city tax dollar city attorney's representatives are here, so perhaps they'll address my question, which I'm going to re-ask. So Bruce James of Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schreck, who has been co-chairman of Mayor Hancock's 2 election campaigns and has represented Mayor Hancock on personal issues, is part of Mr. James and Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schreck are representing Clayton on Park Hill Golf Course land issues. How can we, as Denver citizens, be confident that our interests are being fully protected when Clayton negotiates with the Hancock administration on Park Hill Golf Course land issues? Does this pass the conflict of interest smell test? I invite the city attorney's office representatives to address this directly.
Yes, thank you. I'm John McGrath, Assistant City Attorney for Denver. Okay, John McGrath, Assistant City Attorney for Denver. Brownstein represents Clayton in this transaction. The city is represented by the City Attorney's Office. There's no conflict of interest here. We have been representing the city throughout the discussions. Brownstein has had no involvement with this property outside of their representation excuse me, for Clayton, and so I'm unaware of a conflict. Well, Mr. Hancock is the mayor. Mayor Hancock is the mayor of the city. He is not the city. So if Brownstein represented the mayor in some form or capacity prior to any involvement with this property, it's a separate matter.
Thank you. Perhaps this is a question that we as taxpayers and citizens of Denver can direct to the Denver Ethics Office. Thank you.
So the next question's for Kevin. As a member of Clayton's Citizen Advisory Committee, do you know what the result of Clayton's neighborhood survey were?
I believe I do. Having attended most all the meetings, I think the results came in that open space was the number one, with the number two response being a recreational area. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, if I could just maybe help clarify just a little bit. So there was a question on the survey that asked people, first of all, one question was, are you not at all or somewhat or very supportive of some or all of the 155 acres being used? If you said you were not at all supportive, then you were thanked for your time and you weren't asking any more questions. If you said you were somewhat or very supportive of some or all of it being repurposed, then you were asked to pick your top 3 choices of what that would be, and there was also a write-in. And I believe that you did not have to answer all 3. What our data show is that parks and recreational spaces were among the top 3 of roughly 50% of the respondents. So it's not exactly that, it wasn't exactly that it was the number one choice, it's that 50% of the people who responded included that as one among their top 3. We didn't ask them to rank those 3, 1, 2, and 3. It was just tell us what your top 3 would be. So I just want to be clear about what the data actually say and what they don't say. But clearly people were very interested. Half the people who filled out that survey, about 750 people filled it out. And clearly people were very interested in at least some of it, if not all of it, being accessible park-type land.
Of course. Thank you. And I'll just throw in there one last thing. Is we've also done our own survey, and we're close to 1,000 respondents have indicated that they don't want a full development.
So we'll go back here.
Yes, my name is Rex Kennedy, and I've also been a member of the Park Hill community meetings for over a year now. I'm a Clayton parent, and the results from meeting with everyone and going out to the neighborhood and asking them what they're most involved with, of course, most of the people want a portion of the property to be dedicated to open space. But by and large, the number one thing that people want is either a grocery store or some type of affordable housing. Now, if open space is part of that, that's fine, as long as it's funding Clayton's children. But the number one thing that the community wants is a grocery store, because it's a food desert, and also affordable housing. Now, if that can be coupled with park space, open space, all the better. But Clayton wants to let you know, if it's all park space, that's not going to fund Clayton's children.
Does anybody have a comment? Follow up? Okay, so the next...
Can I throw in something real quick?
Sure, David.
When we speak to grocery stores, I encourage everyone to go to look up Artway Place on Google. It's a 351 affordable unit development that's slated for the land west of Park Hill Village, which is near the Popeyes. Part of their plan is to include a grocery store. So certainly, if that's important to you, I would, and it's important to me, I'm not saying a lot of people, email those folks who are building that and encourage them to follow through with their plan for a grocery store and the commercial development related to that residential area.
So I'm going to try and get through these cards. Bridget, hold on just a second. I got 2 cards, and I'll come back to you. One comment, I live in Park Hill. I don't want to see high rises. Keep the golf course. It's been here forever. Leave it alone. The next card is a question for Charlotte. Considering that the golf course profits only make up 7 to 8% of funding for Clayton Early Learning, is Clayton Early Learning actively looking for other funding to make up the difference so we can both retain the park and your programming?
That's a great question, and I'd be happy to pass the basket if anyone would like to donate before we walk out of the room. I will tell you, if anyone in here works for a nonprofit, you will be living what I'm about to say. But getting unrestricted or general operating funding into a nonprofit is the very hardest funding to raise. Foundations, state and local, tax-funded grants like Head Start, they want to give you money to operate a very specific program and to use that money in a very specific way. The money that comes from the golf course, as I said earlier, I referred to it just informally as it's the glue that helps us hold the rest of it together. There are expenses that we have, as you might imagine, with a 20-acre campus and 12 buildings that were built in the early 1900s. There are boilers that go out. There are other things that happen to that we have to also cover. We try to keep that campus beautiful so that it's an asset to the community. I know that some of the buildings were boarded up for a very very, very long time. It was not the beautiful place that it is today. So I'm being long-winded here. I don't mean to be, but that 7%, while it looks small, it's critically important to our day-to-day operations to be able to have that $700,000 in flexible money that can be used to pay for a boiler that went out yesterday, or it can be paid to supplement our teacher salaries when Head Start doesn't pay what a livable wage is for a teacher's salary. So that's why it's so critically important to us.
Oh, wait. Yep.
And I just want to add, I said this earlier, but I want to repeat it. I don't think anybody expects Clayton to bear the cost if this were to move forward to become a public park. Obviously, Charlotte has her fiduciary responsibility to the trust, and she should be doing everything she can to maximize the money out of it. But hearkening back to what INC's position was, we really have been calling upon the city to come forward and spend some money on it. And really, truly, one of the disappointing things was we had a great opportunity with the bond issue last year. We had almost $1 billion in bond money, and it was a great opportunity to come up with some money to pay Clayton for this asset, and unfortunately that opportunity was lost. The city has a lot of resources still at their hands, and that is part of what needs to be brought forward, is the city needs to come forward with money to figure out how to make this work.
We're about time, however. I'm going to let this go another 15 minutes to try and get all these questions answered. So, Bridget?
Brad, I just want to second what you had to say. That was the main point that I wanted to make. Also, maybe Arcis has heard that Fitzsimmons Golf Course has been closed, which served this part of the community, as well as City Park Golf Course is going to be closed for 2 years, and maybe they figured that their profit margin is going to be going up. Overland Golf Course is going to be closed for a giant music festival, and so maybe Arcis heard all that and decided that their bottom line wasn't going to be so bad next year. So that was just a point.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Brad about other parks in the neighborhood, because I'll give you 3 examples. The mayor just joined a number of other mayors around the country saying that he was committed to a park within 10 minutes of every single resident. And then new studies have come out that parks and green space are essential, critical for the health of our kids. And I'm just wondering if we didn't keep some portion of that space as a regional park, am I missing something? Is there another park? Like, are we counting the 38th and Holly detention pond as a park? I mean, it looks to me like that would be, that is a joke. It's pretty ugly. I really want to see us add to our park space, and I may be missing that there's a new park planned in Park Hill, a large one.
Well, in response, I will just say the city just has gone through what is called the Parks Game Plan planning process. We have Happy Haynes here who led that effort as the executive director of the Parks Department, and I served on that task force for the game plan. The city really developed a lot of information about our parkland, how close people are, with a 10-minute walk and that kind of thing. And what the data the city developed did show is that Northeast Park Hill is considered a, quote, park poor area, and that is underserved. And of course, that isn't looking at current golf course. The current golf course is not a public park, no doubt about it. I'm not aware of any other parks per se that are planned for here, and that clearly is some of what the data the city developed through the game plan that shows that there is a need for parks in this area.
So I'm going to try and get to these cards. For Clayton, why can't you serve all people of the neighborhood? Have you considered a grocery store with the rest of the community benefiting from a 9-hole golf course and open space? We do not need more luxury housing or other buildings. We need to also serve people who make 30 to 80% of median income. Everyone needs fresh produce, clean air, and access to green space. It's not all or nothing.
So whoever wrote that card, I hope you will come to some of our community roundtable planning meetings we're getting ready to have, because those are all on the sort of list of potential ideas of what could happen on this land. So I would agree with that final statement. It isn't all or nothing. It's a both and.
The next question, what is the amount of money that the 7% of income represents?
The fixed fee lease is $700,000 a year. They pay it at about roughly $58,000 a month throughout the year.
Okay, we might actually get this through. Since the 2000 agency agreement, what have been Clayton's approximate annual savings from no longer needing to reimburse the golf course operator, Arcus, for interest, taxes it had been paying to the city on the Park Hill Golf Course land? Sorry, that was a little...
So just to clarify one more time then, there was no tax being charged on that land as long as the city was the trustee of the trust. When the 501c3 that we are, Clayton Early Learning, was incorporated in the mid-'80s at the request of the probate court to become trustee of the trust and to run all the programming, a few years went by and all of a sudden somebody realized that, okay, legally, that land, because, even though we are tax exempt as a 501c3 educational charitable organization, that land is not directly put to a charitable use, therefore taxes would be owed on it. In order to keep from burdening the trust with that tax when it hadn't been for the first 85 years, that's when the agency agreement came into play. So it's not that we are reimbursing our tenant, Arcus, for any of that. It's that we're not paying the general property tax. There is a possessory interest tax charge, which is much like a concessionaire at Winter Park Ski Resort, for example. We share that 50-50 with Arcus. We pay half, they pay half.
When the rent was behind, who was the management company? The comment is, I think it was an old manager, Eagle Golf, not Arcus.
So Eagle and Arcus are the same entity. Eagle changed its name to Arcus.
Okay, great. This is the final question, and then I don't know if the panel each wants to make a final statement. Okay. Each of you claim to be fighting for your children in the future, but seem content to deny the opportunity for other children to enjoy your same opportunity. Can you explain this? I think it says, I just want to live in the city. I'm sorry, whoever's handwriting is, I can't quite read it. Okay?
Thanks for the question. That was part of exactly what I was getting at. I want everyone to enjoy what my family has enjoyed. We have something special over there. And whether it's golf or not, I want a big open green space. I'm not saying 100%, but I want a big open green space for everyone to enjoy. After all, it wasn't just my community that paid the $2 million for the conservation easement. It was the city of Denver. And everyone deserves to enjoy that. And it is a public park, or it is a public golf course. There's not a membership fee to get on. Anybody can walk in and play. But it would be nice to have something that everyone could enjoy. I think it's special, and I want everyone to have that.
Are there any more questions? So I'll turn it back to Lamone Noles. And I want to thank each of you. You're passionate about it, and it's important, and thank you for being willing to show up.
Okay, so this meeting today was not about any decisions that needed to be made, but it was about opening the conversation in the community that's going to be impacted by what goes on in the future. So what we're asking you to do for takeaways is stay engaged by signing up on openspacedenver.org to receive updates about developments regarding the Park Hill Golf Course land. Talk to your friends and neighbors about the issues that were raised today and your concerns as well. And let your council people know how you feel. Either way, they need to hear from you. This is community involvement, and this is the start, but it's not the finish, okay? Things move very quickly, so if you did not get a chance to sign in, I have a sign-in sheet here, as well as some of these real beautiful flyers that you can take with you to give to your friends and family, okay? Any other questions or concerns? Meeting adjourned.
On behalf of INC, I want to thank all the panelists. I think we had a great open discussion. Our next meeting in April, Drew?
Hi, the next INC monthly delegate meeting will be April 14th at Holy Transfiguration Church in Globeville on East 47th Avenue. Hope to see you there. Thanks.
And you could